And we talk warning signs. Is there anything we can do to prevent another mass shooting? The DLA at 8 o'clock begins right now.
So in the last week, more than 30 people have died in 3 separate mass shootings, and this type of violence, unfortunately, is becoming all too common.
Well, the tragic events almost always lead to talk of legislation for stricter gun laws. While new laws may help prevent shootings, understanding why they are happening to begin with could also save lives. And with us now is Dr. Brian Licuanan, a mental health specialist who treats clients with complex mental health disorders at a Better Life Recovery Treatment Center. And Dr. Brian, thank you for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And let's start with something that I actually had no idea of, that there are 4 specific commonalities when it comes to mass shooters.
There can be. Researchers have found some of these 4 factors. Number 1, early childhood trauma. For example, did a child go through some traumatic events, bullying that could have caused some unrelenting resentment and anger? Did they manifest this through aggression towards cruelty to others and animals, right? The other commonality is, have they reached a crisis point? A lot of times we find that someone has experienced some loss of a job, financial distress, highly unresolved grievance potentially at work, right? An interest in past shootings, and they're seeking validation. What we find a lot is that people will research, seeking validation for their cause, for their anger and resentment to lash out on. And lastly, do they have the means? What we're finding a lot are these people who carry out these mass killings actually have a means. So safety, gun safety, is very important in preventing these, or at least circumventing these circumstances.
Well, what we're trying to wrap our head around is, how does someone go from just having, anger toward people or just simple depression to wanting to harm other people? Some of these signs, for example, the shooter in Dayton, the suspect there, he had a list of women he wanted to rape. He also had a hit list of people he wanted to kill. He put these lists together. So one thinks that other people around him may have seen these warning signs.
Absolutely, and that is the difficult part, is what is that distinction between normal childhood development, a mental health condition, to something severe where someone carries out an event like this. So some of the common characteristics that we want to look out for is there a complete lack of remorse, guilt, empathy. Is there heightened aggression? What we find with a lot of these mass killings is that there might have been some type of threatening behavior, abuse to a significant other, a loved one, a coworker. So some of the signs that we need to be able to look for, be very careful and vigilant of.
Well, and if someone is romanticizing mass killings or are infatuated with them or obsessed even with them.
Absolutely, and that's one of the other signs we have to look for is, are they researching? Are they fascinated, obsessed with mass killings? And a lot of times people look for validation on the internet, look for other people who will support that cause, look for people who will validate that resentment and anger, and so that's something we have to, as parents and family and educators, look out for.
Well, and the thing is, if you're on the internet, you leave a trail.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a trail, and we have to be vigilant of that.
Well, it is all of our responsibility as a society, right? So we all want to know what we can do, not after the fact, but in order to prevent something from happening. So what are some things we as a society can do, not just the friends and family of the suspect?
For all of us, I think the first line of defense, that is my recurring theme, is education. Education, understand what's going on, what are the signs and symptoms, and what can we do. Another part is communication, open dialogue with our loved ones. There's a concept called validation. Validation is to accept someone's truth. Doesn't mean you have to accept it or believe it, but I believe that is one of the barriers to where a lot of people may have commit these acts. They're alienated from society, they feel rejected. So validation starts early on in childhood, to accept and hear their truth.
What about mental illness? Because that's a doozy.
In fact, do you think there's still a stigma when it comes to mental illness, or do you think now we can actually openly talk about this?
Gratefully, there is still a stigma with mental illness, but I think we've come a long way with wearing away at those stigma. However, what we are finding is that when we start to talk about it, what we see with that validation, people aren't afraid to talk. When we give unconditional support and open dialogue with people, we tend to destigmatize mental health.
Well, now we have to do more than talk. We have to see to it that people who are dealing with these issues actually get the help that they need.
Absolutely.
Dr. Bryan, thank you so
Thank you
much.
very
It's a
much for
pleasure to
coming
have
in.
you
So
here.
much.
It's
Thank you for
great
having me.
information, great insights. Really appreciate it.
We'll be right back.